Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, hundreds of Nigerians are set to fly home from South Africa after the official death toll from this month's xenophobic violence rises to 12. But how far is Abuja likely to go in facing off against Pretoria in defence of its nationals? We hear from a correspondent in Nigeria. Also, a return to a dark and recent past. Former victims of torture at one of Ethiopia's most notorious former prisons tore the cells in which they were abused. Mekilawi is a symbol of a violent legacy that will hopefully never be repeated. And thousands of the first conscripts in Morocco's newly returned compulsory military service start training this month. They get food, board and a wage, but there's also criticism that the exercise is meant to lessen the likelihood of public dissent. Our correspondent sent us a report. But first, South Africa says that at least 12 people have been killed since foreigners began being the targets of rioting and attacks at the end of last month. 2 of those victims died just on Sunday night. The xenophobic violence began in Johannesburg and Pretoria, but spread elsewhere in Gauteng province. The bloodshed led to reprisal attacks against South African businesses in other countries on the continent and diplomatic calls for Pretoria to do more to protect foreign nationals. Now, Nigeria is planning on repatriating about 600 of its citizens from South Africa this week. Samuel Okoye is in Abuja. He tells us more.
It's an indication that all is not well as far as the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa is concerned. If all were well, you wouldn't see Nigerians coming back voluntarily. It shows things are not too good. And of course, I believe that when these people arrive, the media is going to interview them, and there will be a lot about concerning what these people will say about their experience in South Africa. This, of course, will also increase the anger, which is currently quite high against South Africa. At the diplomatic level also, I think it symbolizes the fact that a lot has to be done for these 2 countries to get along. We've seen quite some problems between them in the past, but I think what has happened of recent and the repatriation of the Nigerians has taken the matter to a very high peak.
So clearly on the ground, there's a lot of resentment and anger against the treatment of Nigerians in South Africa. Nigeria itself has also made some kind of diplomatic gestures to show its displeasure, but it has also said that it doesn't want an escalation of this situation. And is there really much more that it can do? Economically, Abuja needs Pretoria more than vice versa. So how far is Abuja likely to go in terms of defending its nationals?
I think Abuja will actually be careful. It doesn't pay Nigeria to escalate this issue. The more you escalate it, the more the citizens get involved in this. And of course, Nigerians are not only blaming South Africa, they're also blaming the government. The economy is bad. That's why people are leaving for abroad. And then, of course, many feel the Nigerian government has not done enough. So the earlier this matter ends, then the better for Nigeria. Of course, they've signified that both countries will work quietly to end this matter, to prevent anything like this happening.
Samuel Okoye there for us in Abuja. Now, South Sudanese rebel leader Riek Machar is back in Juba for talks with President Salva Kiir about a stalled peace deal that was signed a year ago and is meant to end civil war that broke out at the end of 2013, costing at least 380,000 lives. Machar is currently in exile in neighbouring Sudan. The 2018 deal's meant to see him return to South Sudan as vice president once a power-sharing government is in place. Now, this week's meeting is to work out technical details like the creation of a unified army and the drawing of state boundaries. It's meant to last just 2 days. And Pope Francis made a whistle-stop trip to Mauritius on Monday on his last day of a tour of Africa that also took him to Madagascar and Mozambique. About 100,000 people turned out to hear the pontiff say Mass in Port Louis. He also visited a sanctuary dedicated to Jacques-Désiré Leval, a 19th century French priest who helped former slaves on the island. Now, after a 13-year hiatus, Morocco has brought back compulsory military service for 19 to 25-year-olds. About 15,000 people started training this month. Over 1,000 are women who voluntarily signed up. Conscripts get food, board and a monthly wage, but there are fears that the move is intended to suppress the likelihood of dissent. Our correspondent sent us this report.
It's 5 in the morning, a rude awakening for those called up to military service. After quickly making their bed, the 3,000 young people in this training centre are getting ready. It's the same treatment for both men and women, straight out of bed and into morning exercises. Then it's a quick jog back to the dormitory for breakfast. A radical change for these young people coming from civilian life, and it can be hard to adjust to the rhythm.
It's all about motivation, because when you're only one person, it's hard to go running from 5 to 6 in the morning. But in a group, it becomes easier. It becomes easy.
Solidarity and discipline are some of the values taught here. The 15,000 called up to serve started basic training a few days ago with a mixture of theory and practical exercises.
They've made quite a lot of progress. At the start, it wasn't easy to instill them with discipline and a sense of duty and responsibility. The primary objective was, above all, that they managed to integrate, and I think it's been quite successful in that sense.
By tradition, some of the orders are given in French. Every afternoon, there are close combat exercises and obstacle courses.
When we were civilians, we chose everything that we did, and we did what we wanted. When we got here, we learnt to count on ourselves. I'm very proud to be here.
After 4 months of basic military training, the recruits then specialize in subjects like IT or security.
Once the specialization phase is concluded, the young recruits will be better prepared to go into the working world, where they can be useful with their new skills across different domains.
65% of all the unemployed in Morocco are young people, meaning that 2/3 of these cadets volunteered, attracted by the promise of a wage and prospects.
Mekelawi prison was one of the most feared in Ethiopia before it was closed last year. For decades, it was where political prisoners were abused and interrogated. It was closed last April under reformist Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who says that he wants to leave those days firmly in the country's past. It was open to the public this month, giving visitors hoping for a brighter future for their country, a chance to walk the cells that were once the scenes of violence and injustice.
For decades, Mekelawi was the most infamous prison in Ethiopia. Political prisoners were tortured here. It was used by all recent governments, including the military dictatorship of Mengistu Haile Mariam. Last year, it was closed by the new Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. He's been eager to be portrayed as a reformist and has opened the jail to the public for a few days. Bifkadu Hailu was a blogger who was detained in this cell for 3 months without charge in 2014.
I always remember when the policemen came in to take me, I hear the voice of the handcuffs. Heart starts to bump. You get scared, and then you just give your hands to be handcuffed and be taken to the torture rooms.
Kefiyalu Tefera lost his legs after being tortured in Mekelawi prison.
This is a place where human beings were tortured physically and mentally. Many lost their lives. Thousands were tortured here. It's emotionally disturbing for me to come here.
Visitors flocked to the jail and said it was an eye-opening experience.
I see that this kind of prison must not be opened ever again. As much as possible, we have to talk to each other in a civilized manner to solve our political differences. We have to learn from our history that blood and torture won't lead us anywhere.
Despite opening the prison to the public, Abiy Ahmed has been accused of continuing to use the repressive tactics of previous regimes, especially after the assassination of 5 military and government officials in June.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. That's it. Take care.
In 2013, Edward Snowden's explosive revelations made him the most wanted man in the world.
Honestly, I was terrified. I was so scared.
He was helped in his Hong Kong hideout by a group of asylum seekers at great risk to themselves.
Every single minute we are in danger.
They know how life in Hong Kong or my country.
Si les anges gardiens de Snowden se font déporter, ils retournent en enfer.
Don't miss our exclusive report about the people who put themselves on the line to defend the values of freedom.
Please protect these families.
Reporters, presented by Mark Owen on France 24 and France24.com.